In a small, parched town where the sun beat down like an angry drum, a man named Leo stood with his hands on his hips, watching the dust swirl in the air. The town had been struggling for years. The crops were dying, the soil was cracked, and hope hung by a thread. Leo wasn't just an ordinary resident, he was a mechanic, a father, and a dreamer. He spent most of his days fixing cars, but at night, he mulled over big ideas for a better tomorrow. One sweltering afternoon, Leo walked into the community center where everyone gathered to talk about their problems. The room smelled of old coffee and despair. People slumped in chairs, their faces tired and worn. The mayor, a man named Gus, was supposed to lead the meeting, but he was absent yet again. His presence, or lack thereof, had become a symbol of everything wrong in the town. Someone blurted out, desperation dripping from their words. Another voice echoed, filled with anger and frustration. Leo felt a surge of courage. He knew they couldn't keep going like this. He said, his voice steady though his heart raced. A gasp echoed through the room, followed by murmurs. It was a crazy idea, yet somehow it felt right. As the comments swirled around him, Leo took a deep breath. He could practically hear the town's suffering. He remembered how his father always said, people need something to believe in, Leo. He spent hours drafting a speech, pouring every ounce of worry and love for his community into it. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Leo stood alone on a small platform in the park with only a handful of locals watching. His hands shook, but he knew he had to push through. Folks, he began, his voice gaining strength, we are in crisis. His words poured out like a river bursting its banks, each phrase drawing people closer. He spoke of dreams for better roads, for revived farms, and most importantly, for a reliable water source. The crowd nodded. They'd heard promises before, but this felt different. Leo wasn't just reciting numbers, he was speaking from the heart. As he spoke, he noticed the eyes of a woman named Clara light up with hope. Clara worked at the diner and had a son who was suffering from dehydration. She was frustrated and scared, and Leo could see that his words were reaching her. Suddenly, he locked eyes with her, and it was like they were sharing a secret. In that moment, he wasn't just a mechanic, he was a leader. After the speech, the people began to talk among themselves. Maybe he is the one man said with a soft whisper. Leo realized that he had ignited a spark, but he would need more than words to fan that flame. Word spread quickly. Within days, people started to gather around him, some even offering to help his campaign. A group of young volunteers signed on to spread his message. They made flyers and set up meetings, gently engaging those who usually stayed quiet. Each interaction brought a little more energy to their movement, but not everyone was happy. Gus felt threatened. He had been in power far too long. His friends in high places whispered to him, urging him to put Leo in his place. They didn't understand the people's longing for change. They only saw a young man riling up their comfortable lives. Then came the day of the board meeting. The evening air was electric with distraction and anticipation. People filled the seats, chatting excitedly among themselves, daring to hope that change could come. Leo stood on one side of the room, his heart hammering in his chest. There was no turning back. Gus took to the podium, a sneer on his lips. You think Leo can solve our issues? He ridiculed the idea, but the people didn't laugh. Instead, they shifted uncomfortably in their chairs, almost as if they were standing up for Leo with their bodies. A moment of quiet hung in the air as Leo stepped forward. I know I may not have the experience some of you want, he said, his voice unwavering. But I know this town. I breathe the same air as you. I feel your pain. He continued, what I don't know in experience, I make up for in passion. We can't ignore our problems any longer. Like Clara, we can't sit back while our children suffer. Leo's voice echoed through the room and reverberated in their hearts. With each sentence, he painted a picture of a thriving town filled with laughter and life. The crowd, once filled with whispers of doubt, began to clap. The board members looked astonished. Some shared surprised glances with one another. Leo had done something they hadn't expected. He had fused their despair into a collective hope. As the night went on, the tension ratcheted up. Gus attempted to drown Leo's message in cynicism, but the crowd wouldn't allow it. They were ready for change, and they wouldn't be quieted again. With every passionate plea Leo made, more voices from the crowd joined in. Together they shouted, we need water. After the meeting, the board members huddled together, mumbling, casting quick glances at Leo. They had never seen such determination from the townsfolk. The pressure mounted, the people wanted change, and they wanted it now. Hesitantly, they called for a vote. One board member asked, a bead of sweat down his forehead. Hands went up across the room like a field of daisies blooming on a bright spring day. Leo felt his heart race. His dreams were hanging in the balance. What if they voted against him? And then came the moment. Only a few hands went up, and Leo felt a fire ignite within him. One by one, the board members shifted uneasily. Their eyes darted between Leo and the crowd. This wasn't just about Leo anymore. It was the people's cry for justice. Finally, the board chair leaned forward. The ayes have it. A roar of applause erupted. People leapt from their seats, hugging and cheering. Leo stood overwhelmed, an emotional tide sweeping through him. Tears brimmed in his eyes. It wasn't just a victory for him. It was a victory for everyone who had ever felt hopeless. From that day forward, Leo became not just a candidate, but a beacon of hope. He worked tirelessly, creating plans for new water systems and reaching out to experts who could help. He brought the community together to fundraise, to advocate, and to educate themselves about their needs. As the months rolled on, they started seeing results. More townsfolk ventured out to support one another. They organized volunteers, installed pipes and filters, and slowly but surely they rose from the ashes of despair. It was more than water, they were rebuilding a community. Gus, now feeling the pressure, tried to undermine Leo. He started rumors suggesting that Leo was in over his head, but instead of breaking Leo down, it forged him into something stronger. Community meetings grew in size. The townsfolk rallied around Leo, inspired by the change they were seeing. In the end, Leo not only won that fight for water, but ignited a movement rooted in unity, resilience, and the ultimate belief that one person can stir the waters of change. The people found hope where there seemed to be none, and they learned that together they could achieve the unimaginable. Leo would always remember that day in the community center when someone simply asked for water. It was a call for help, a cry for change, and it turned into a powerful push that swept them all into a future brighter than they dared to imagine. And it all began with a mechanic who chose to believe that sometimes a single voice can change the world. The town square was quiet, save for the sound of a single, desperate voice cutting through the air. "Can someone please help us?" Leo's heart raced as he stood in the center of the crowd, his words hanging in the heavy silence like the last breath of summer before a storm. People glanced around, their expressions a mix of anger and resignation. The sun beat down mercilessly, a cruel reminder of their daily struggle. Weeks had dragged on since their last meeting, each day bringing new reports of dwindling water supplies and failing crops. No matter how much they yearned for change, the town remained trapped in the same cycle of despair. The mayor, a man named Gus, had promised better days, yet here they were, parched and desperate, clinging to hope like a lifeline. Leo wasn't just another face in the crowd. He was a mechanic by trade, but as his father once told him, the heart of a mechanic wasn't just about fixing cars, it was about understanding how things work and what they need. And right then he sensed what the town needed more than anything, a leader. He took a deep breath, his voice suddenly stronger. "We can't let our voices be silenced anymore." The crowd shifted, caught off guard. A ripple of energy built, an undercurrent of shared frustration feeding into Leo's words. Clara, a mother with worry lines etched deep across her brow, spoke up. "What do you want us to do, Leo?" Her voice trembled, but there was a spark of hope in her eyes. "Let's make a change together." Leo felt the crowd leaning closer, drawn to his conviction. "I'll run for mayor. Together we can take our town back. We can demand water." Gasps filled the air, a mixture of disbelief and cautious optimism. Could this ordinary mechanic truly lead them? Leo locked eyes with Clara, and in that moment he felt the weight of her fear, her dreams, and her hopes. The people needed more than promises. They needed a voice, someone to fight for them. That night Leo scribbled ideas and plans in a notebook, fueled by a blend of excitement and fear. He whispered promises to himself under the dim light of a flickering bulb. With every line he wrote, his resolve strengthened. Change didn't just need a voice, it needed a plan. He envisioned community meetings, discussions filled with possibility and fueled by determination. Days turned into weeks and Leo began to rally volunteers. He knocked on doors and shared his vision. "We can do this, we can demand water and resources." Excitement bubbled over, spreading like wildfire, yet every moment of hope was met with shadows of doubt. Gus, the sitting mayor, barely acknowledged Leo's meetings. "That's just noise," he would say, brushing past anyone who dared bring up Leo's name. Power has a way of corrupting perception. Gus saw Leo as a threat, a little man shaking up the status quo. One chilly morning, as the frost clung to the ground, the town held a public meeting. Leo stood before a gathering of weary faces, his heart pounding in his chest. The air felt thick with anticipation. "Today we take a step forward," he began, his voice firm yet vulnerable. The crowd erupted with applause, hands rising like sunflowers reaching for sunlight. Leo reveled in the moment, the energy feeding his spirit. But then Gus stood up at the back, his brow furrowed. "You really believe you can solve our water crisis?" His words rolled out heavy with disbelief. The crowd grew quiet, unsure of how to react, but Leo sensed it, doubt swirling in the air like a fog. He took a step forward, meeting Gus's gaze head-on. "Yes, I do." With every ounce of courage, he laid out his plan, gathering signatures, talking to local businesses, even connecting with water agencies for support. As he spoke, he could see the flicker of hope ignite in Clara's eyes once more. To Leo, that flicker meant everything. It was the fuel he needed. The people were tired, but they were tired of being pushed around. Each word echoed, resonating with their collective pain. Still, the weight of Gus's laughter lingered in the background like a haunting melody. Months rolled by, and soon it was election season. Flyers adorned telephone poles, streets filled with the chatter of change, and Leo was out there, shaking hands, meeting families, and sharing homemade cookies with smiles at every door. Clara helped pass out leaflets about their campaign. But then came the night Leo had always dreaded, the board meeting where he would face off against Gus. The hall felt suffocating, the murmurs of the crowd faded into a dull hum as tension filled the air. As Gus walked in, dressed sharply in a tailored suit, Leo felt the sharpness of the room. Gus mocked, his voice oozing with condescension. Leo clenched his fists, eyes narrowed. It was easy to grow small next to Gus's towering ego, but he stood tall, fueled by the voices of the town echoing in his mind. The board members exchanged uneasy glances. Leo took a breath. This had to be about more than just him. It was about everyone wanting better lives. I care about the people here. I see Clara's struggle. I hear the fears of families who can't quench their thirst. 20 faces stared back at him, visibly moved. Yet, do we really have the strength to pull this off? Leo could feel Gus's resentment, laced thick in the tension hanging over them like dark clouds. As the meeting drew to a close, the moment arrived, the vote. Gus sat back, relaxed, confident he'd squashed Leo's rising star. But when the board member raised their hand for a vote, Leo felt the heartbeat of the town in his chest. Silence, broken only by some hands hesitantly rising, a hesitant show of unity. Fewer hands went up, but it was the next moment that would change everything. The board chair, visibly sweating in the relentless heat of scrutiny, leaned forward, visibly nervous. The ayes have it. A cheer erupted like the breaking of dawn after a long, cold night. Leo's heart soared. He hadn't just won a vote, he had ignited a movement. People leaped to their feet, hugging, cheering, tears streaming down their faces. Clara rushed to him, her eyes wide with disbelief and joy. "We did it, Leo," she cried, wrapping her arms around him. Leo could hardly believe it himself. The crowd was on fire, united by a shared passion for something they all desperately needed. It was a win for everyone. With the first steps taken, Leo was soon knee-deep in planning the water projects. The town came together with extraordinary energy. Families worked side by side, transforming old systems, improving pipes, and even learning how to conserve water resources together. They rallied around common goals, rekindling a sense of community lost in years of neglect. But Gus continued to undermine them. He spread rumors, claiming Leo was going to ruin the town's future. The tension between them turned palpable, each interaction crackling with unspoken words, each meeting feeling like a storm waiting to break. Yet for Leo, it was an opportunity to showcase resilience. He knew the struggles, the fears, and the doubts, but he also felt the power of strength in numbers. This time they wouldn't back down. Months passed, and water began to flow more consistently. The crops began to sprout, smiles became more frequent, and laughter echoed through the streets. They held town picnics, shared stories, and watched children run freely under the sun, their spirits high. It wasn't just about water, it was about regaining what they had lost. People were alive again. Leo heard stories of strength and family bonds being stitched tighter with each passing day. Clara's son was healthy, playing soccer in the park. He was a symbol of the hope Leo had ignited, a reflection of their collective fight. Eventually, the board scheduled another meeting, a chance for a new vote concerning Leo's initiatives. As Leo entered the hall, it felt different this time. The energy pulsed with possibility. With every face he greeted, he saw not just supporters, but friends who had fought with him. The board again took their motion, but no longer was it just a vote on paper. It was a declaration of unity. "Today we're not just voting for a plan, we're voting for our future," Leo began, his voice booming across the room. Once again, the hands rose more significantly, with determination that surged like a river breaking free from a dam. The results blared over the laughter. The board voted unanimously. Cheers erupted. Leo could hardly stand still as victory coursed through him. They exchanged hugs, tears of joy, and laughter tumbling forth like a waterfall after years of drought. The town was alive, renewed with hope and resilience, but it didn't stop there. Leo took it upon himself to install programs for education, new systems focusing on water conservation and community engagement. He walked alongside experts, turning the dreams of his past into tangible plans. Weeks turned into years, and Leo became more than just the mayor. He became a symbol of hope. His journey was filled with struggle, but it was rooted in the belief that change only happens when you choose to fight for it. It began with one desperate plea for water, and that moment transformed a mechanic into a leader, igniting a fire that would last for generations. Together, they had discovered the power of unity, of hope, and the true meaning of community. Leo stood in his town not just as a mayor, but as a walking testament that sometimes a voice rises from the dust of despair, turning into a powerful clarion call for change. "Please," Leo shouted, his voice cracking under the weight of desperation. In the middle of the town square, surrounded by weary faces, he could feel their pain like a heavy blanket pressing down on him. It was a hot afternoon, the sun high and merciless, and as he looked around, he saw people who had been pushed to their limits. Families stood in silence, their eyes hollow and stubborn hope clinging only to the fringes of their weary hearts. They had endured months of drought, watching their crops turn to dust and days of struggle blur into a painful routine. Everyone had come to a breaking point, their resources were all but drained. Clara, a local diner owner, pleaded, her hands trembling. She was a mother who had watched her son grow weaker with every passing day, the lack of clean water chipping away at their lives. "I don't know," Leo replied, the weight of the world pressing down on him. It was in that moment of collective hopelessness that Leo made a bold decision. What if the idea tumbled out before he could think better of it? A shocked silence fell over the crowd. Was it a crazy idea? Maybe. But the more he thought about it, the more it felt like the right thing to do. This was more than a title, it was a chance to be the voice for those who had lost theirs. Before he could second-guess himself, voices began to lift. Someone shouted from the back. A wave of murmurs rippled through the crowd, some filled with doubt, others igniting sparks of curiosity. Taking a deep breath, Leo felt a fire ignite within him. I may be a mechanic, but I know how to fix things. The conviction in his words pulled the crowd closer. He could see glimmers of hope flicker in Clara's eyes and feel the building energy. In the following days, Leo set to work. He spent long hours preparing his campaign, scribbling ideas late into the night. Maybe a mechanic didn't have the experience of seasoned politicians, but he understood something far more important, the pulse of his community. He visited homes, learning about their stories, their struggles, and what they dreamed of most. And they listened to him. The tide began to turn as neighbors joined his cause. The grassroots movement blossomed. Clara became his right hand. Together they printed flyers filled with Leo's visions of a better tomorrow, community gardens, a new water pipeline, and a promise to unite everyone for a common goal. The town buzzed with discussion, and soon they held impromptu gatherings in backyards and living rooms, plotting how to take their futures back. But Gus, the mayor, wasn't about to let Leo's words sway the townsfolk. He was an old-timer, a man who had been in charge for years. He rolled his eyes at Leo's ambition, snorting dismissively. He would say, a sneer twisting his lips. Gus wasn't just a man in power, he was a wall standing firm against anything new. Leo knew he had to fight not just to win the hearts of the people, but also to break down the barriers Gus had embedded in their minds. The night of the town hall meeting arrived. The air crackled with tension, electric and thick, as the townspeople filled the foldable chairs facing a dim light. Leo stood at the podium, feeling vulnerable yet bolstered by a shared hope. We need to change, he began, looking out at familiar faces. We can't depend on old promises anymore. His heart raced. The crowd murmured approval, all shimmering in their eyes, but Gus remained unyielding. His question hung in the air like a dark cloud, shadowing the moment. Leo, feeling the weight of everyone's hope, took a deep breath to steady himself. I may not have your experience, but I know this town. The murmurs grew louder, unity building like a crescendo. Leo felt the energy shift, a palpable tension giving way to belief. But no sooner had the crowd started to rally behind him did Gus rise again. No one in this town wants a novice running our future. His voice dripped with skepticism, and Leo could see shadows of doubt creeping back into the faces of those who had been so enthusiastic moments before. Yet somehow Leo held his ground. He remembered Clara's son, the people suffering in silence, and the faces of his neighbors who had once shared their stories. This isn't about me, he insisted. It's about all of us. The silence was deafening. Indeed, did they want to remain powerless? The fear that gripped the hearts of many began to dissolve. One by one, the crowd slowly started to nod, the reality washing over them like a fresh breeze. Weeks became months as Leo continued to build momentum. Campaigning was exhausting, but there was something about their shared struggle that made the fatigue worth it. Every door he knocked on was an opportunity to connect. I'm not just asking you to vote for me, he would say, looking into each person's eyes. Support began to swell like a rising tide. Families signed petitions, students organized rallies, the community flowered with a spirit of solidarity. Leo spent countless nights preparing speeches, visiting families, and creating plans grounded in the realities of their lives. But Gus fought back, using his influence to spread doubt and fear. He bellowed at every chance, instilling uncertainty. Yet instead of breaking them, these attacks only galvanized Leo's supporters. They held fundraisers, collected donations, and found ways to spread their message. The town began to buzz with the energy of change. Finally, the day of the vote drew near. Leo stood outside the polling station, heart pounding in his chest. The weight of the moment was immense. The townspeople filed in, their expressions varying from determination to anxiety. Leo shouted, throwing his arms wide to embrace them all. Inside, he felt like his heart was a wild drum, each beat echoing the message he'd been longing to share. When the votes were counted, the air grew thick with anticipation. Leo stood among a small group of supporters, nerves etching lines into their brows. Clara's hand found his shoulder, warmth spreading through him, grounding him. Then the announcement broke through the tension, and the room fell silent. The votes are in. The crowd erupted into cheers, the weight of despair lifting in an instant. Laughter and shouts of joy filled the hall, tears of happiness spilled from Clara's eyes. Leo felt a rush of disbelief. The fight hadn't been in vain. People spun him around, and just like that, the mantle of leadership was placed on his shoulders. He could feel the spirit of the community bolstering him, propelling him forward. Yet it was only the beginning. The momentary victory was not just a win, but a heavy responsibility. Leo understood the depth of the challenge ahead, turning promises into action. He rallied the townsfolk, calling meetings to strategize and plan. Change wouldn't come easy, but he was determined to lead them towards a brighter future. he announced, full of purpose. With shared determination, they worked tirelessly. Small successes blossomed into larger goals. Pipes were repaired, funding was secured, and innovative water conservation measures emerged. Slowly but surely, the town began to change. As the days turned to months, Leo was no longer just a mechanic. He had become the heartbeat of the town. Their ambitions transformed into action, with every neighbor uniting in pursuit of something greater. The first drop of clean water flowing into the town was monumental. Clara stood with her son, tears streaming down her face as they tasted the simple joy of a glass of water. A childhood filled with laughter once more echoed through the streets, and for the first time in a long while, hope wasn't just a distant dream, it had become a part of their reality. The board meetings started to transform as well. Attendance exploded, and Leo would sit at the head of the table, no longer trembling under the weight of doubt. Instead, he inspired passion and confidence. Weeks turned into months, and what started as a simple cry for help blossomed into a full-fledged movement for change. The town had collectively reclaimed their lives and revitalized their community. With every challenge faced, every issue addressed, Leo had proven that the power of unity could reshape destinies. They had turned a mere ask for water into a movement of hope and resilience, breaking through barriers that had once seemed impenetrable. From a simple mechanic to a mayor, Leo became a testament to the truth that sometimes the greatest changes begin with a single courageous voice willing to step forward. On that hot afternoon when he spoke for water, he had unlocked the door to a future filled with possibility. And as Leo watched the sun set over the town he now served, he understood in his heart that true leadership wasn't about the power or position. It was about listening, believing, and fighting alongside those you serve, a community united in purpose and spirit, ready to take on the future together. Leo's voice cut through the tense silence in the town hall. It was a simple question, but one filled with desperation. The walls felt like they were closing in, and the weight of the crowd's suffering pressed heavily on his shoulders. 100 pairs of eyes looked at him, some filled with disbelief, others with a glimmer of hope, yet many showed resignation, and acceptance that nothing would change. The room was stark and gray, reflecting the feelings within. Town meetings had become a regular occurrence, but they often ended with the same disappointment. The mayor, Gus, stood at the front, his arms crossed and a frown etched on his face. He had been in power for years, promising solutions but delivering little. "I'm tired of just talking," Leo continued, swallowing hard as he felt the room's tension. Every person here had stories of struggle, and they needed more than empty promises. "We can't just sit here while our children are thirsty, we need action." A murmur swept through the crowd, some nodded while others exchanged doubtful glances. But Leo knew one thing, they all felt it, the frustration, the pain, the urgency of their situation. He needed to channel that collective energy if he ever wanted to create change. In that moment, a thought ignited in Leo's mind. What if? The words escaped before he could swallow them back down. Silence enveloped the room, the weight of his declaration settling heavily on everyone's shoulders. Suddenly, Clara, a woman with fierce determination etched into her face, spoke up. Her voice rang out, challenging yet curious, and a ripple of murmurs echoed through the crowd. Leo steadied himself. He replied, meeting her gaze, "I may not have political experience, but I know this town. I live here, I work here, I care about the people here." That little spark of hope ignited within the crowd as they wrestled with his words. It was risky, maybe even foolish, but Leo felt it in his bones, a stirring, a calling. They needed someone to trust, to believe in again. After the meeting, Leo walked home, still shaken by his own boldness. He glanced around at the empty streets, the shadows of faded dreams flickering in the evening light. The trees lining the sidewalk looked weary too, their leaves drooping under the weight of a long summer. Days turned into restless nights as Leo began planning his campaign. He painted posters and wrote letters to the local newspaper, pouring each pixel of his soul onto pages designed to inspire. "We can revitalize our community," he declared. "Together we can bring hope back." As recognition began to grow around town, people started to rally behind him. Clara was his biggest supporter. "You've got the heart, Leo," she told him, her voice bright with belief. "People are ready for change." With every door he knocked on, another voice joined his cause. They worked tirelessly, holding community meetings in backyards and sharing their stories under starlit skies. Families swapped recipes and hopes, laughter spilling freely as they began to believe that change was within their grasp, but not everyone was eager for this shift. Gus began to notice people gravitating toward Leo. At first, he laughed it off, dismissing Leo as a harmless dreamer, but as the movement gained steam, his laughter turned to anger. He sneered during community meetings. But these words didn't dampen Leo's spirit. Instead, they fueled him. After all, wasn't being a mechanic about fixing what was broken. It was about understanding how things worked and what people needed. The day of the big town hall meeting arrived. The air was thick with anticipation as the hall filled, the energy palpable, tension electrifying. Leo stood at the podium, his heart racing like an engine about to roar to life. He gazed at the crowd, their faces illuminated in the warm overhead lights. Leo began, his voice quaking but unwavering. "It's about all of us, our families, our children. The audience buzzed with excitement. People lined in, hanging onto his every word as his passion radiated through the room. They could envision a future where water flowed freely, gardens blossomed, and children laughed without worry. But Gus was watching, arms crossed and eyes narrowed. He stood up to challenge Leo. "You think you can lead these people?" The laughter from Gus's followers pierced the enthusiasm Leo had built. He momentarily faltered, but then firmed his resolve. "I may not have a political title, but I have one thing that's stronger. I have the community behind me. We're ready for change." His voice soared and the crowd erupted in applause. That applause was just the beginning. Leo left that meeting invigorated, feeling the support of every neighbor and friend carrying him forward. From that moment, he dedicated himself wholly to his campaign. Day after day, he engaged with townsfolk, promising to fight for them, sharing ideas and dreams under the sun-drenched sky. Weeks rolled on, but Gus couldn't shake the feeling of threat. As Leo gained momentum, Gus grew increasingly desperate. He unleashed his political powers, spreading rumors with an iron fist. "Leo doesn't have what it takes." The message echoed through back alleys and living rooms, but every time Gus spoke, Leo felt more certain of their cause. He believed in the people, he believed in their shared vision. He held community events, inviting families to collaborate on a plan for revitalization. They brainstormed ideas, igniting enthusiasm like fireworks in the night sky. One balmy evening, standing amid a crowd under twinkling stars, Leo proclaimed, "If we work together, we can demand repairs to our old water systems. We can create community wells." And just like that, the energy in the crowd shifted, turning into action. Volunteers signed up, ideas soared, and excitement enveloped them. They were no longer at the mercy of Gus's indifference. They were rising like a tidal wave, but as they grew stronger, so did Gus's retaliation. He called for a special meeting, eager to try to thwart Leo's efforts. In that dimly lit conference room, confrontation hung thick in the air. "Ladies and gentlemen, let's be realistic," Gus began, a smirk on his lips. His eyes scanned the room, searching for nods of agreement, yet Leo stood tall, grounded by the faces of those he fought for. "I may not have a traditional background, but I have something more powerful: passion. I live and breathe this town." The crowd murmured again, swaying in his favor. Fear began to melt away under the warmth of Leo's conviction, and for the first time, board members began to whisper among themselves, contemplating the possibility of change. The time for voting finally arrived. As they stood in that same conference room, hearts fluttering like hummingbirds, Leo cast his gaze across familiar faces. He couldn't help but smile at Clara, who stood with her son, hope visible in her eyes. Leo bellowed, determination ringing through his words. The crowd echoed, voices rising with a power they hadn't felt in ages. The vote was cast. As Leo stood awaiting the results, anticipation buzzed through the room. This was their moment, a collective heartbeat thumping in sync, and when the board finally announced, "The votes are in," the eruption surprised even him. Cheers erupted, blankets of joy enveloping the night like soft clouds. Clara rushed to Leo, her eyes shimmering with tears of elation. "We did it, Leo." Leo could hardly believe it. In that moment, he felt every bit of the weight he had been carrying slip away. The victory wasn't just his, it was shared by every heart that had fought alongside him. But the journey wasn't over. Sitting at the head of the town hall, Leo faced the reality of leadership. "We must get to work," he reminded everyone at the very next meeting. The townspeople excitedly brainstormed ways to collaborate with experts, apply for grants, and draw resources together. The unity that had fueled their fight now fueled every action. They held fundraisers, organized community events, and even started training programs on water conservation. Leo found himself more than a mechanic. He had become a beacon of hope, leading the charge against the odds that had long held them down. As the months rolled on, clean water began to flow back into their town. Families thrived again. The laughter of children echoed down the streets, life returning in full bloom. And in that moment, Leo realized the true power of community. It wasn't just about winning a title, it was about igniting a fire that brought everyone together, giving them strength to face any battle. With each new day, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. Leo wasn't just in charge, he was part of the community that had pulled together to overcome hardship. Together, they transformed from victims of circumstance into builders of their future. Leo stood strong, watching his town flourish, understanding deeply that true leadership encapsulated listening, empathy, and determination. Everything had started with a request for water, a simple plea that changed the very fabric of their lives. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Leo looked out at the vibrant gatherings in the square, families enjoying each other's company, and a wave of gratitude washed over him. He had fought for the people who had fought for him. It was a testament to the strength of unity and the power of believing that change is possible. In the annals of their town's history, the story of a mechanic who dared to ask for water would echo through generations, forever a symbol of resilience, hope, and triumph. It was just the beginning. "Can anyone help us?" Leo's voice rang through the dusty town square, desperate yet determined. The sun blazed overhead, casting long shadows that felt heavy with despair. Around him stood neighbors, friends, and familiar faces, each one echoing the same empty worry. This was not just another hot day in Cedar Grove, this was a community teetering on the edge of a crisis. For months, they had watched their crops dry up, their wells run shallow, and their hope begin to wither. Leo felt the weight of their pain in every glance and heard it in every murmur. As he scanned the crowd, he noticed Clara, a mother of 3, clutching her youngest child tightly. Worry etched deep lines on her face, and in that moment Leo saw not just her fear, but the collective fear of the town, the fear of being forgotten, discarded like so many empty bottles in the dust. He shouted, urgency lacing his tone. He took a step forward, feeling the ground beneath him tremble with the emotion of his words. The crowd fell silent, tension hanging like an unstrung bow. Faces turned toward Leo, some skeptical, others hopeful. They needed someone to believe in, someone to trust when everything felt lost. Could he be that person? The words tumbled out bold and raw before he could second-guess himself. The audience shifted, murmurs swirling like leaves in the wind. Was it madness? Maybe. But the thought ignited something deep inside him, something fierce and unyielding. Clara's eyes widened, a flicker of hope igniting within her. Do you really think you can win, Leo? I believe we can, he replied, locking eyes with her. We can't keep waiting for change. That night Leo lay restless in bed, tossing and turning. The light from the street lamp flickered through his window, casting shadows that danced like doubts in his mind. Running for mayor felt both terrifying and exhilarating, like standing at the edge of a cliff ready to leap. But wasn't that what they all needed? A leap into the unknown to reclaim their lives. As days turned into a campaign, Leo poured his heart into every word he spoke. He set up meetings in homes and community centers, connecting with neighbors over cups of coffee and the shared pain of loss. He urged, weaving dreams into the fabric of their conversations. Slowly, the town began to wake up. People started to stand behind him. Clara became his right hand, a beacon of unyielding support. She urged excitedly, and together they lit a fire in the hearts of the townsfolk. As Leo walked down the streets, he could feel a shift. Familiar faces began to greet him differently, with a newfound respect and trust. They would say, excitement mixed with trepidation. But there was still that lingering shadow of doubt, the looming presence of Gus, the incumbent mayor who had ruled with an iron fist. Gus was not a man accustomed to challenge. When he learned of Leo's bid for power, he scoffed, dismissing the young mechanic as nothing more than a nuisance. He scoffed to anyone who would listen, his disdain dripping from every word. Yet for every mocking comment Gus made, Leo found strength. He absorbed the negativity, turning it into fuel for his fire. He thought of Clara and every child who deserved better. One crisp evening, under the glow of flickering streetlights, Leo held a meeting at the old community center. The room was filled with the sound of chatter, hope palpable in the air. Leo stood at the front, the flickering bulb overhead dimming in and out like the community's hopes, ready to either shine brightly or flicker out. We need to demand change, he implored, his voice steady but charged with emotion. We deserve clean water, a safe future for our children. Together we must stand up. Murmurs of agreement began to swell, growing louder until it became a chorus of voices echoing the dream Leo had ignited. People began to rise, hands in the air, pledging their support. Clara's enthusiasm was infectious, inspiring others around her to join the rallying cry. But just as momentum surged like a wave ready to crash, Leo felt that familiar sense of unease wash over him. For every cheer, there was an undercurrent of doubt. Could a mechanic really lead them out of this turmoil? Days turned into weeks, and it was time for the town hall debate, a crucial moment that would either propel Leo forward or bring him crashing down. As he arrived, he could feel the lingering tension. Townsfolk filled the chairs, anticipation buzzing in the air. All eyes were on him and Gus, the looming giant of the political landscape. Gus strode in, confidence radiating from him like heat from the pavement. He looked at Leo, a smirk dancing on his lips. You think you can beat me with your dreams? You're just a mechanic, Leo. But Leo stood tall, undeterred. He felt the energy of the room, strong and unwavering. I might not know it all, he countered, but I know what this town needs: real leadership. The crowd's energy shifted, a collective inhalation of hope and excitement. They were ready, and they reflected that in their cheers and applause. Weeks passed, and the campaign escalated. Leo met with families, visited farms, listened to their stories. Each encounter fueled his determination. He wasn't just running for office, he was building relationships, weaving a tapestry of shared struggles and aspirations. On the day of the election, the air crackled with anticipation. Leo stood outside the polling station, watching neighbors file in, but a wave of anxiety washed over him. Doubts crept in like shadows at dusk. What if it wasn't enough? As he watched Clara walk past with her children, he steadied himself. We're here for a reason, he told himself. When the polls closed, the room filled with hushed conversation, hearts raced as the votes were tabulated. Leo stood amid supporters, the air thick with anticipation. Then the moment arrived, an announcement. The crowd leaned in, breath held tight. The majority has voted. Cheers erupted as disbelief turned into celebration. Leo's heart soared, he had done it. Clara rushed to him, tears of joy streaming down her face. You did it, Leo. As the excitement pulsated through the room, Leo felt an overwhelming wave of gratitude wash over him. The push for change had not been just his alone, it had been a collective fight fought in unity. But with victory came new challenges, responsibilities that weighed heavily on his shoulders. Now the real work begins, Leo declared at their first town hall meeting as mayor. The community rallied around him, their collective will igniting a fire within each heart. They brainstormed plans, invited experts, organized volunteer days, and together set to work creating a plan for revitalization. The days grew longer as they tirelessly pushed forward. Families showed up with willing hands, eager to return to life. Volunteers came, ready to dig in and get their town back on track. Leo felt like a conductor leading his orchestra, and for the first time it all began to harmonize. As they brought in experts to discuss water conservation and repairs, hope burgeoned. With every successful meeting, they began to see real progress. Together, they repaired broken pipes, drilled new wells, and educated the community on sustainable practices. Slowly, the town transformed. Children played outside without worry. Families celebrated in the streets as they worked to cultivate not just healthy lives, but renewed spirits. They were creating a community where laughter merged with fulfillment. But then came the day when Leo stood in front of the board for an important vote, one that would determine their next course of action regarding the water systems. It was a crucial point. Leo stepped up to the podium, feeling the weight of everyone's hopes rest on his shoulders. Leo's voice rang out, stronger than he could have imagined. As the board members looked back at him, the hesitations and doubts had faded. They cast their votes, and when the results were read, an uproar of jubilation erupted in the room. The crowd swelled with elation, hands clapped, and voices soared higher than ever. But among those cheers, Leo stayed grounded, remembering the struggle that had brought them all together. He wasn't just a leader, he was one of them, a member of a town that had found strength in unity. Over the next few months, Leo watched as the town continued to flourish. Water flowed freely, and children laughed joyfully, their smiles mirroring the renewed spirit of Cedar Grove. The parched earth began to revitalize, yielding crops that had long been dormant. In those moments, as he strolled through the revitalized town towards the old community center, Leo felt an overwhelming sense of pride. He hadn't just become a leader, he had led a movement. Together, they had transformed from despair to hope, from barren ground to flourishing lives. And as he looked around at the smiling faces, friends, neighbors, and families, he recognized the extraordinary power that had swept through their lives. It had all started with a simple plea for water, and together they transformed it into a lasting legacy. Leo stood tall, a beacon of tenacity, embodying the heart of Cedar Grove. Because sometimes the desire for change is ignited by a single brave voice, a voice that doesn't mope in despair but calls the community to action and reignites the spirit of hope. With every new day, Leo reaffirmed his belief in the community and his role as their servant. Empowered by their struggles and triumphs, he was ready to tackle whatever challenges lay ahead. Together, they were unstoppable. Together, they were family. Please, can anyone help us? Leo shouted, his voice breaking as it cut through the thick air of the packed town hall. The room was silent, but for the echo of his desperation, a single plea hanging over the faces of weary townsfolk, each one carrying their own pain and worry. The mayor sat at the front, Gus, arms crossed with a smug look of indifference. He had heard complaints before. To him, this was just another meeting filled with noise. But the suffering in the room felt raw. You could almost taste it. Leo could see mothers clutching their children a little tighter, men nodding in agreement, their expressions heavy with the burden of despair. Without water, we can't survive. He felt the tension crackle in the air as he swept his gaze across the crowd, locking eyes with Clara, a single mother whose son had been sick from the heat. Her worried face mirrored the collective anguish. The room erupted in murmurings. Some were whispers of agreement, others filled with doubt. Someone finally asked, a voice shaky, trembling, but filled with urgency. In that moment, an idea sparked in Leo's mind, daring to break free. The declaration rolled off his tongue before he could think about it. Gasps surrounded him, eyes widening in disbelief. Leo, you? Clara's voice rose above the murmur, a blend of shock and curiosity. The question hung heavily in the air, but in that instant, Leo felt something shift within him. Yes, I do. I may not have the experience, but I know this town. His heart raced as he spoke, each word becoming a lifeline woven into their shared desperation. If Gus can't fix this, then it's time for new leadership. As murmurs of agreement filled the room, Leo's own anxiety began to dissolve. People looked at him differently now, as if they could see not just a mechanic, but a potential leader. A man willing to fight alongside them, not just to lead, but to serve. After the meeting, Leo walked home under the weight of his boldness. He passed the cracked sidewalks and peeling paint of their small town, each step echoing with determination. We can do this, he whispered to himself. Days turned into restless nights as Leo planned his campaign. He spent hours writing speeches, outlining goals, and preparing to meet the townsfolk face to face. He understood the burden that hung over them, the shared grief over lost water, lost crops, and lost hope. Clara became his confidant, her unwavering support giving Leo the courage to move forward. You can't let them put you down, Leo. You're fighting for something real, she said, her passion igniting a fire in him whenever doubts began to creep in. He knocked on doors, cleaned up streets, and organized gatherings in the park. he would say, speaking directly to the heart of each family. People began to nod along, caught up in something greater than themselves, but then came the heavy weight of Gus. The mayor's hold on the town felt indomitable. He scoffed at Leo's ambition, dismissing him as a mere mechanic. What does he know about serious issues? Gus sowed seeds of doubt, trying to intimidate Leo at every turn, but with each derogatory comment, Leo stood taller. He knew the truth. Leadership wasn't just about title, it was about heart. The more Gus pushed back, the more Leo wanted to push harder to prove him wrong. As the weeks rolled on, the day of the town hall debate approached a pivotal moment that would either catapult Leo forward or send him crashing back into obscurity. Standing backstage, the weight of the moment pressed down on him. With a deep breath, Leo walked onto the stage, the eyes of the town focused solely on him. He could hear the faintest murmurs behind him, the quiet anxiety spilling into the air. He glanced at Clara, who gave him a subtle nod of encouragement. Leo started, his voice confident but laced with emotion. "It's about all of us, our future." Cheers erupted, filling the room with fervor. People stood clapping, inspired by the passion in his voice. But perched behind the podium, Gus leaned in, ready to strike back. "Really, Leo, you think you can just walk in here and lead us?" Gus sneered, his tone dripping with contempt. Leo swallowed hard, refusing to be intimidated. "I may not have your experience in politics, Gus, but I understand the needs of this community better than anyone." The energy in the room shifted. For the first time, doubts began to dissipate like fog in the morning light. People started to chant Leo's name, a rhythmic call to action that filled the air with a sense of possibility. Days turned into weeks and excitement flooded Cedar Grove. With Clara by his side, Leo organized community meetings and garnered support. They painted signs, hung banners, and filled the town with a hopeful energy. It became their rallying cry, but Gus wasn't ready to surrender his power without a fight. He continued to unleash bitterness, spreading lies that Leo's plan was unrealistic, that a mechanic wouldn't know how to run the town. But each attack fueled Leo's determination. On the night of the election, Leo stood outside the polling station, anxiety bubbling inside him like a shaken soda can. This was their moment, the culmination of their fight. As townsfolk filed in, he felt their energy wash over him, confidence surging with every smile exchanged. When the polls closed, the room filled with tension. The darkness outside seemed to mirror the uncertainty in the air. Then the moment arrived. The local official stepped up to the microphone, eyes scanning the eager crowd. He declared, and silence enveloped them all. "The majority has voted for." A roar erupted, the sound of hope and joy breaking free. Leo stood in disbelief as Clara rushed to embrace him, tears of happiness streaming down her face. "We did it, Leo," but with victory came responsibility. The cheers echoed in his ears, and Leo experienced a mix of exhilaration and fear. This was only the beginning. Days later, standing at the head of the town hall, Leo addressed the crowd gathered before him. "This isn't just about me anymore, it's about all of us," he said, sincerity emanating from every word. "We have to work together to bring change." As the townsfolk listened, their energy swelled. They were ready to channel the momentum of the election into action. Ideas flowed and volunteers stepped forward. They wanted to reclaim their town, and they were ready to fight. With every passing week, progress blossomed. They held meetings, reached out to experts, and designed a comprehensive plan for restoring the water supply. Leo felt pride swell in his chest as he witnessed the town coming together, spirit lifting their burdens, but challenges arose. Leo was not yet ready for the backlash from Gus and his cronies. They spread rumors, attempting to undermine his efforts at every turn. "He's just a mechanic," echoed through the undercurrent of Cedar Grove. The more they undermined him, the more resolute Leo became. He couldn't let the negativity deter the community's resurgence. He held more meetings, inviting townsfolk to voice their concerns, ensuring they felt seen and heard. As the days turned into months, they finally made progress. Clean water started to flow, the crops revived, and laughter filled the air once more. Families began to thrive, reconnecting with what it meant to live in a community, nurturing each other through the gifts of resilience. One day, as Leo stood outside the community center, he noticed families gathering for an impromptu picnic. Children played, laughter ringing out like music through the air. In that moment, he realized they had built something beautiful, a community united by shared goals and mutual support, but there was still so much to do. At the next board meeting, Leo stood in front of the members, fueled by the changing tide of the town. "We need to vote on more than just water repairs. We need to discuss sustainability," he urged. The board members exchanged glances, but the community filled the room. They stood with Leo, voices aligning like arrows aimed at a target. When the vote came, the outcome felt almost inevitable. The chair announced, and the room exploded into cheers. Leo felt an overwhelming wave crash over him, washing away months of worry and struggle. From that moment on, Cedar Grove wasn't just a town. It was a living testament to the power of community. As Leo walked through the streets, he realized that he hadn't just been elected mayor. He had become part of something bigger, a heart beating in rhythm with extraordinary change. Months passed, and Leo watched as families flourished, children played, and the town transformed. He worked tirelessly, forever aware of the fragility of their progress, pushing to ensure their gains would last. And in the quiet moments, he would sit on his porch, looking out at the sunset, a blend of orange and pink hues spilling over the horizon. He thought back to that day in the town hall when the plea for water had spiraled into a movement, one that had changed their lives forever. With every challenge overcome, Leo had proven something significant. Sometimes it takes just one voice to break the silence, one heart to spark a revolution. And with each beat of his heart, Leo knew they wouldn't stop until they had built a future abundant with hope for every person in Cedar Grove. Together, they had rekindled the fire of community, turning their pleas into a powerful legacy, a story that would live on, inspiring generations to come. Through their shared journey, they had discovered strength not just in leadership, but in unity, love, and the unyielding spirit of the human heart. Leo's voice cracked as he stood before a disheartened crowd, his heart racing. The town hall was packed, but silence fell like a heavy curtain. The palpable desperation in the room replaced the usual chatter. Faces that had once been vibrant now seemed weary, etched with lines of worry. Under an unforgiving sun, Cedar Grove was struggling. The drought had dragged on for months, draining every well and hope alike. Leo could see the toll it took on his neighbors' mothers clutching their children, farmers bowing under drought's relentless grip, elderly folks with shadows of despair tightening around their eyes. He urged, stepping forward, feeling a fire ignite within him. "We need action." The murmurs that followed felt almost electric, but Leo sensed the lingering doubt that hung thick in the air. Then an unexpected voice rose from the back. "Who do you think you are?" Leo fired back, confidence flooding his veins. "I care about this town. I care about all of you." Clara, a single mother with desperate eyes, stood up. "What do you propose, Leo?" There was a challenge in her words, but also a spark of hope. "I'll run for mayor." Leo felt the surge of his conviction. It was as if the words leaped from his mouth, breaking free into the world. He stepped forward again, looking around the room, searching for affirmation. The faces around him flickered with uncertainty, but also curiosity. Clara asked, her voice wavering between doubt and belief. Gus was the sitting mayor, a man more comfortable with bureaucracy than actual change, a man who had long forgotten the faces of those he served. "Yes," Leo declared, his voice rising with urgency, stirred by the quiet hope he saw in Clara's eyes. The crowd began to stir, voices overlapping, murmuring among themselves. That evening, Leo went home, adrenaline propelling him forward. As he sat at the kitchen table, the dim light casting shadows around him, he began to think deeply about what he had just proposed. Could he really challenge Gus? His mind raced through the possibilities. He had spent years fixing cars, working hard to understand mechanical problems, but this felt monumental. That night he penned plans, ideas flowing like the water for which they all longed. The following days were a whirlwind as Leo began to rally support. He traveled door to door, speaking to anyone who would listen. "We can do this." He caught the attention of families, teens, and the elderly alike, their eyes beginning to light up with a spark of hope. Clara became his right hand, ever enthusiastic and fiercely dedicated. She suggested one morning, her eyes alight with possibility. Word spread like wildflowers in spring, and soon the little town premiered the idea of a new leader. But just as Leo began to feel momentum, the dark shadow of Gus loomed large. At the next town meeting, Gus sneered from his high-backed chair. He practically laughed, his words dripped with mockery, trying to belittle what Leo was attempting. "What do you know about leadership?" But Leo stood firm, heart pounding in his chest. "I might not have experience, but I know this community like the back of my hand. I see the hurt, the struggle." As Leo spoke, energy surged among the crowd, lifting their spirits as they fed off his passion. He highlighted the issues they faced, painting vivid pictures of a future washed clean with water, smiles, and gardens filled with life. For the first time, it felt like a vision was blooming, a tangible hope sprouting in the midst of despair. The weeks rolled on, the air thick with excitement. Clara helped create posters plastered across town, each delivering a message of unity and strength, they declared. Every door Leo knocked on felt like another step toward change. Neighbors opened up about their fears, their struggles to keep their families fed. One elderly man asked, a tremor in his voice. "Absolutely," Leo replied, sincerity pouring from him. When the day of the town debate finally arrived, Leo felt every nerve in his body awaken. The town gathered in the old gymnasium, excitement hanging in the air like the faint smell of popcorn. With whispers of support tangling around him, he took to the stage. Leo began, the microphone shaking in his grip. "It's about each and every one of you. All of us deserve a better future." The energy shifted in the room, people recognizing the deep-rooted pain they shared, inspired by Leo's words. But as soon as he captured their enthusiasm, Gus shot up like a storm cloud. He scoffed, eyes flashing. "He's got no plan, no experience." The crowd fell silent, doubt creeping back in like a cold wind, but Leo could not allow fear to seep in. "You're right, I'm not a politician," he shot back, regaining his footing. "But I'm one of you." As he spoke, he saw Clara's unwavering gaze, and it fueled his fire. "We can build our future together. We can demand water." Days stretched on asterisk, and Leo couldn't shake the mounting tension of the approaching election day. He paced his small living room, heart pounding like a drum. "This isn't just about winning," he muttered to himself. Election day dawned bright and clear, the sun glinting off rooftops like a beacon of hope. Leo stood outside the polling station, shaking with anticipation. People began to arrive, families with children, farmers with dirt under their nails, all ready for change. As the polls closed, Leo and his supporters filled the room, their eyes focused on the official as he began to tally the votes. Each number felt like a lifeline, fluttering in the air like a fragile bird. The unofficial results came in, and as the final names were counted, the official's voice rang out. The room fell silent, tension palpable, and the majority has voted for. A roar erupted, shouts of joy and disbelief intertwined. Leo stood frozen, mouth agape, before Clara rushed forward, enveloping him in her embrace. "You did it, Leo." The celebration felt surreal, a dream blossoming before his eyes. The town that had once seemed defeated now came alive, but with triumph came responsibility. Leo realized that the real work was just beginning. The very next day he set to work. He declared at his first meeting as mayor. The townsfolk rallied, ready to roll up their sleeves. Their initial meetings focused on hope, but soon turned to hard plans. They organized workshops to educate families about water conservation, engaged engineers to discuss repairs, and even started a community garden. As they worked side by side, Leo felt a bond grow, a connection deeper than just mere neighbors. They were family. Yet amidst the progress, Gus lingered like a storm cloud. He wasn't about to let go of his grip on the town that easily. He spread rumors, claiming Leo was in over his head, that they'd all regret the change. "Chaos will ensue," he shouted from behind his podium. But these attacks only galvanized Leo's supporters. They were ready to stand firm. They held rallies, filling the park with laughter and determination as they focused on their future. They shouted, unity rising like a wave. The first drops of relief came a few months later when the repairs were finally complete. During a hot afternoon, Leo announced, "Water is back." Cheers erupted as the first drops flowed through the newly laid pipes, bursting forth like the town's spirits. Leo stood at the front of the gathered crowd, watching as tears of joy streamed down Clara's face. Children rushed forward, splashing in the puddles that formed under the old oak trees. Laughter danced along the streets, filling the air with life, and that wasn't all. As the town grew stronger, so did the community's heart. They began organizing events, a festival of water, celebrating their newfound resource, bringing everyone together in joy rather than despair. As Leo began to see the fruits of their labor take shape, he realized that being a leader meant more than fixing problems. It was about fostering relationships, building trust, and igniting fire within the people. Months passed, the seasons began to shift, and as autumn's chill crept in, Leo felt grateful for the journey they'd all undertaken. Cedar Grove had transformed from a place of despair into a thriving community once again. One evening, as he stood on the porch of Clara's home, sipping lemonade, he looked out at the stars twinkling overhead. The soft laughter of children echoed around him, a sound he would forever cherish. He turned to Clara, the quiet strength that had been with him through it all. "I couldn't have done this without you, without all of you," he said. And as they stood there side by side, a sense of accomplishment washed over him. They had taken his simple call for water and turned it into a lasting legacy. They had fought for their lives, and through unity and resilience, they became a family again. From that day forward, Leo understood a truth he would carry with him. The power of change begins with one brave heart asking for something better. And as long as they stood together, Cedar Grove would not just survive, it would thrive. Together they had rewritten their story, a story of courage, unity, and endless hope. And so, under the shimmering stars and the gentle hum of life around them, Leo vowed never to stop fighting for Cedar Grove, ensuring that this was just the beginning of a bright new chapter. "Can anyone help us?" Leo's voice pierced through the thick silence in the crowded town hall. The atmosphere felt heavy and the tension was palpable as weary townsfolk turned their eyes toward him, their expressions a mix of frustration and hopelessness. Cedar Grove had been struggling for months. The drought had sucked the life from the very soil they depended on, leaving behind a landscape of cracked earth and dying crops. Leo stood at the front of the room, heart racing, surrounded by faces marked by despair. His neighbors were thirsty, not just for water, but for hope. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of every gaze upon him. "We can't keep waiting for someone to save us. We need action." Murmurs spread through the room, voices low but filled with agitation. Someone questioned, their tone edged with defeat. Gus was the sitting mayor, an older man with a comfortable grip on power who had become increasingly disconnected from the struggles of the very people he had vowed to serve. Leo felt a flicker of resolve in his chest. The words tumbled out unexpected yet liberating. The room fell into stunned silence, jaws dropping as the gravity of his declaration sank in. Leo's heart thudded loudly in his ears. Could he really challenge Gus? Finally, Clara, a mother of two who had been struggling to keep her family afloat, spoke up. "Do you really think you can?" "Maybe I am," Leo replied, determination rising in his voice. "But I know this town, I know its heart." A wave of murmurs spread, uncertainty mingling with a desperate hope. People began to nod, leaning closer, drawn in by the fire in his eyes. In that moment, he realized he wasn't just speaking for himself. He was voicing their shared anguish, their collective desire for more. They needed someone who could ignite change, and perhaps he could be that person. Walking home that evening, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. Leo felt an exhilarating mix of fear and excitement. Could he really challenge Gus? The next few days turned into a blur as Leo poured everything he had into his campaign. He stayed up late, drafting speeches, sketching plans on napkins, poring over notes, gathering support wherever he could. Imagine a cedar grove where families can thrive, kids can play, and everyone has enough water, he would say, speaking passionately to anyone who would listen. Clara became his confidant and ally, tirelessly distributing flyers around town. She exclaimed one day, her enthusiasm infectious. Word spread and soon the town was buzzing. After weeks spent planning, the air was thick with anticipation as Leo prepared to present his case at the community center. On the night of the meeting, the hall was packed, faces filled with curiosity and reserve. Leo stood before the crowd. The warm glow from the overhead lights illuminated his determined expression, and his heart raced with hope and fear. "Tonight isn't just about me, it's about all of us," he began, his voice steady as he locked eyes with Clara. "It's about our future. We can't sit idle while our children suffer. We need water." A wave of applause erupted, echoing through the hall. Leo felt invincible, but as the cheers filled the air, he spotted Gus lurking at the back. The mayor wore a skeptical smirk, arms crossed defiantly. Gus challenged, his tone dripping with sarcasm. The crowd hushed, tension spiraling in the air. Leo's heart raced, he could feel every stare directed at him. "I may not have political experience, but I have something more important. I care," Gus scoffed, his confidence faltering slightly. Leo shot back, gratitude swelling within him. "What about the people, the ones you claim to serve?" The murmurs began again, and Leo seized the moment. "Together, we can build a future." A future filled with water. The audience erupted again in cheers, a tidal wave of passion washing over the room. Leo could feel exhilaration coursing through him. He was finally stepping into a role he never thought possible. Less than a week later, Leo woke up with a knot in his stomach. Election day had finally arrived, the culmination of the weeks of hard work, hope, and a fierce desire for change. He looked out the window at the flock of birds soaring high above, imagining the freedom they felt. Polling station, a buzz surrounded him as voters showed up, families, friends, neighbors, all ready to cast their votes. As Leo greeted each one, he felt the weight of their expectations resting on his shoulders. This wasn't just about him, it was about bringing hope back to Cedar Grove. When the polls closed, a heavy silence enveloped the room as anticipation simmered. The count began, the official's voice steady. The votes are being tallied, the tension was unbearable, every heartbeat echoing in their ears. After what felt like an eternity, the moment arrived, and the majority has voted for. A deafening roar filled the room, joy erupting like fireworks. Leo stood frozen, soaking in the realization. He had done it. He glanced at Clara, who hurried toward him, eyes shimmering with tears of joy. "We did it," she cried, embracing him tightly. But deep down, a different kind of weight now settled on Leo. He had won, but the responsibility loomed larger than ever. The next day, Leo gathered everyone in the community center, a whirlwind of excitement filling the room. He declared, standing at the front with Clara by his side. The crowd cheered, energy surging around them, ignited by possibilities. They organized volunteer days, reaching out to engineers and water conservation experts, brainstorming ideas and drawing connections. With every passing week, Leo felt the community growing closer, their shared struggles weaving a tight-knit web of resilience. Yet in the shadows, Gus continued to loom ominously, spewing doubt and fear. "You think this mechanic can handle it?" he warned during town gatherings, his voice slicing through the optimism. Every negative word fueled Leo's determination. He fought against whispers and prejudice, always willing to prove his worth to those who questioned him. He rallied, and with each hard-fought victory, confidence flowed through Cedar Grove like the water they all so desperately craved. Then came the day they finally got the first signs of success. With a network of volunteers, they restored the old water systems. As clean water began to flow from the taps once more, the town erupted in celebration. Leo stood at the edge of the cheering crowd, soaking in their joy. Families rushed forward, laughter spilling, children splashing in the renewed life of Cedar Grove. Hope blossomed once more, and as flowers bloomed in their gardens, the community felt it. A change was here. But with this newfound joy came a deeper reality. Leo began scheduling regular town meetings, eager to discuss more than just water repairs. "We can't become complacent," he urged, addressing the crowd filled with smiles. "We need to ensure this doesn't happen again. We must address water conservation, sustainability." Spoke, the crowd grew quieter, the initial excitement giving way to apprehension. "What if Gus comes back?" someone asked, fear shaking their voice. Leo's heart sank slightly. He had feared that insecurity might creep in, but he had to stand his ground. "We are stronger together." But as if summoned by the fear in the crowd, Gus's voice rang out again. "You all really think Leo here can lead? He's only had this position for a moment." Anger surged through Leo, but he quickly composed himself. "Listen to me, we've already begun to take charge of our water supply. We brought life back to Cedar Grove. I promise to do everything I can." Suddenly, the door swung wide open and a representative from the state stormed in looking frantic. The atmosphere shifted, the excitement and hope fading into confusion. The room fell silent again as all eyes turned to the newcomer. Someone shouted from the back, their voice filled with dread. The representative faced them all, tension evident on his face. "If we're pulled to aid other areas, funding and resources may be scarce." Leo felt the ground shift beneath him, his heart racing. This was the turning point they all feared, the shadow they had sought to escape. "No, we've worked too hard," he exclaimed, urgency flooding his words, but the representative raised a hand, silencing him. "We're facing statewide decisions." The mood turned grim, anxiety and fear hanging thick in the air like a storm cloud. Leo could feel every heart in the room sink. It was as if the ground under their feet had turned to quicksand, threatening to pull them down again. "I refuse to accept that," Leo shouted, the fire in his belly igniting once more. This was not the end, it couldn't be. He would not let the town he loved slip through his fingers without a battle. As the meeting devolved into chaos amidst rising voices and digging questions, Leo stood firm, the weight of what was to come making his heart pound. He couldn't let fear win. Chain their doubt around him, faces turned to him, confusion morphing into determination. They rallied, united by the cause Leo had awakened in them all. But deep down, Leo felt the shadow of uncertainty creeping close. Would they be able to overcome the impending disaster? Could they forge a new path forward, or was this the moment they would all fall back into despair? As chaos swirled around him, Leo knew they were on the brink of something monumental. The future of Cedar Grove hung in the balance, and one thing was certain: this was just the beginning of a fight for survival they never expected. With courage and unity, they might rise from this crisis together, but would it be enough? The unanswered questions loomed large, and the weight of the moment pressed down like an unexpected storm. Would they emerge stronger, or would they be swept away? The answer remained just beyond their grasp, waiting to unfold.